The silence shattered as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez raised her voice, her words a lifeline for millions, hanging by a thread. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Which states? Which city? We love to know and connect with our viewers. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the Capitol steps, casting long shadows that danced with the tension in the air. AOC stood firm, her red dress a bold contrast against the white marble, her hands gesturing with a fervor that silenced the murmurs of the gathered reporters. A man in a navy suit held a microphone close, his notepad trembling slightly in the breeze, while cameras clicked relentlessly. The small crowd pressed forward, a mix of journalists and onlookers, their eyes locked on her as if she held the key to a national reckoning. This was no ordinary press conference. It was a desperate stand, a battle for the soul of healthcare in a nation teetering on the edge. AOC's gaze swept the crowd, her expression a blend of exhaustion and unyielding resolve. She had barely slept, her phone buzzing non-stop since her latest X post went viral, urging constituents to flood House Republicans with calls to save Medicaid. The response had been overwhelming, thousands of retweets, a deluge of messages, voices from every corner pleading for action. Now, with the vote looming, the weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders, she adjusted her stance, the hem of her dress brushing the stone, and spoke with a voice that carried both urgency and steel. "We're at a breaking point," she began, her tone cutting through the hum. "Millions, working families, children, the elderly, are depending on us to protect Medicaid. But there's a faction in this House ready to slash it for political gain. That's not governance. That's a betrayal of everything we stand for." The reporter leaned in, his brow furrowed, pen poised. "Congresswoman, the GOP argues these cuts are essential to stabilize the budget. What's your counter to that?" AOC's lips pressed into a thin line, a spark of anger flashing in her eyes. "Stabilize the budget by throwing the sick and the poor under the bus? That's a choice, not a necessity. We've got billionaires paying less in taxes than their housekeepers, corporations dodging their fair share, and they're telling us we can't afford health care? The math doesn't lie. Reversing those tax breaks could fund this program for years. This is about priorities, and theirs are upside down." A ripple ran through the crowd, some nodding, others scribbling notes with feverish speed. A woman near the back, clutching a sign that read, "Healthcare is a right," called out, "Don't back down, AOC." The Congresswoman flashed a quick, grateful smile before turning back to the reporter. She knew this wasn't just about a soundbite. It was about igniting a fire under the undecided, rallying her party to hold the line. Behind her, the Capitol's columns stood like silent sentinels, a monument to the democracy she fought to preserve. But inside, the corridors buzzed with chaos. She'd spent the morning in a fractious caucus meeting, her voice rising above the clamor as she pushed back against compromise. The Democratic leadership was divided. Some saw the cuts as a grudging necessity for bipartisan cover, while others, like her, saw it as a capitulation. She'd stormed out with a vow to mobilize the base, her phone lighting up with texts from allies and adversaries alike. Standing here now, she felt the promise burning in her chest. The reporter pressed on, his voice probing. "There's speculation that some moderate Democrats might side with the GOP on this. How sure are you of keeping your party united?" AOC took a steadying breath, her hands clenching briefly before relaxing. "I'm sure because the people are with us. I've seen the flood of calls hitting offices, thousands from every district. These aren't just stats. They're nurses, teachers, single parents lying awake, wondering if they'll lose coverage. My colleagues feel that pressure. If they don't yet, they will by the time the vote comes." The reporter nodded, jotting a note, but a gruff voice cut in from the side, a cameraman with a thick Bronx accent. "What about the heat, Congresswoman? You've been hammering the GOP hard. Some call it reckless. Aren't you risking burning bridges?" She turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Reckless is letting people suffer because we're too scared to call it what it is. I'm not here to coddle those who trade healthcare for tax breaks. If that burns bridges, so be it. I answer to the people, not the party playbook." The crowd erupted, a mix of cheers and boos, the tension thickening like a storm on the horizon. AOC raised a hand to quiet them, her mind flashing back to a recent town hall in the Bronx. A constituent had confronted her, voice shaking with frustration over rising costs and neglected streets. She tried to respond, to listen, but the room had turned volatile, forcing her to leave. The sting of that moment lingered. Critics had pounced, labeling her detached. But here, now, she knew this fight transcended one misstep. It was about the bigger picture. The reporter shifted, thrusting the microphone forward again. "There's a rumor of a late-night session to sway votes. Any truth to that?" AOC's lips curved into a faint smirk. "Let's just say I'm not planning on much sleep tonight. We've got a team ready to make calls, knock on doors, do whatever it takes. This doesn't end until the final tally." Her words were cut off by a sudden surge of noise. A group of protesters marched into view, their chants reverberating off the Capitol walls. "Save Medicaid! Save our lives!" they shouted, waving handmade signs. AOC's expression softened, and she stepped toward them, raising a fist in solidarity. The reporter followed, his crew scrambling to adjust angles. She exchanged a few words with a young man at the front, his eyes bright with hope, before returning to the microphones. "This is what it's about," she said, her voice rising. "These are the voices we can't ignore. They're not begging for charity. They're demanding a system that doesn't punish them for being human. We have the power to deliver that. This vote isn't just about dollars. It's about who we are." The reporter scribbled furiously, his colleague tweaking the camera focus. The sun dipped lower, bathing the scene in a warm glow, but the urgency remained electric. AOC knew the night ahead would be brutal. Phone calls with wavering Democrats, strategy huddles with her staff, perhaps a last-ditch social media push. She'd done it before, during the Green New Deal fight, staying up until dawn to lock in support. This was different, though. The stakes felt visceral, the opposition more dug in. The press conference began to wind down as a young aide hurried over, whispering urgently in her ear. AOC nodded, her jaw tightening, then addressed the crowd. "That's all for now, but keep the pressure on. Every call, every post, every voice counts. We'll meet you on the other side." The reporters scattered, some rushing to file stories, others lingering for stray quotes. AOC stayed on the steps, watching the protesters fade into the distance, their chants lingering like an echo. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the latest X notifications, support from activists, jabs from opponents, a torrent of personal stories. One stopped her cold, a nurse from Queens describing how Medicaid had kept her son alive after a sudden illness. Her throat tightened. This was her why. Inside, the Capitol hummed with activity. Her office was a whirlwind of organized chaos. Staffers hunched over laptops, phones ringing incessantly. Her chief of staff, Maria, a wiry woman with a no-nonsense air, handed her a coffee. "We've got 7 on the fence," Maria said. Her voice clipped. 3 might flip if we can get them one-on-one. Let's make it happen," AOC replied, taking the cup. "Set up the calls. I'll talk to them myself." The night unfolded in a blur of voices and arguments. She connected with a moderate from the Midwest, his tone hesitant but open. "I hear you, Alex," he said. "But my district's split. Half want the cuts, half don't. I need backup." "I'll give you cover," she promised. "We'll issue a statement, highlight your district's needs. But you've got to stand with us." He agreed, reluctantly, and she moved to the next, her voice growing hoarse, but her determination unshaken. By midnight, the office quieted, the staff thinning out. AOC sat at her desk, reviewing the latest whip count. 6 votes still hung in the balance, but the tide was turning. She posted a quick update on X. "Late night in D.C. Every call is a lifeline. Keep pushing. We can win this." The replies poured in, a mix of encouragement and desperation. The next morning, she returned to the Capitol, her red dress swapped for a tailored blazer, her eyes shadowed but fierce. The vote was hours away, and the hallways crackled with last-minute deals. She cornered a colleague in the elevator, her pitch rapid and pointed. "Think of your constituents," she urged. "Think of the letters you've gotten. This isn't abstract. It's their lives." The chamber filled as the clock ticked down. AOC took her seat, hands clasped tightly, watching the roll call begin. Names were called, votes recorded, yes, no, present. The tension was suffocating. When her name came, she stood tall, voting nay with a clear voice. The final count teetered on a razor's edge, the room holding its breath. Then, the speaker's gavel fell. The bill failed by a margin of 4 votes. AOC exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. Colleagues patted her shoulder, some grinning, others somber. She stepped outside again, the Capitol steps now bathed in morning light, and faced the waiting cameras. "We did it!" she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Not me, us. The people who called, who marched, who refused to let this go. This is your victory." The crowd cheered, the reporter from yesterday nodding as he captured her words. AOC lingered, soaking in the moment, knowing the fight wasn't over. But for now, they'd prevailed. What do you think about this Medicaid battle and AOC's role in it? Share your thoughts below.